week, we're going to learn a lot about using the mole to talk about different quantities of elements and chemicals. But before we can do that, we need to learn just a little more vocabulary about matter. Specifically, for us to be able to put a chemical into a mole, we need to make sure we are putting only one type of matter into each mole classification we make, at least at first. So what do I mean? Let's get started. There are two types of matter out there, substances and mixtures. A substance can be represented by a single chemical formula. Mixtures have two or more components that can be represented by two or more chemical formulas. Whenever you take a sample of a substance, regardless of where it comes from, it will have the same physical and chemical properties. Individual units of a substance are linked together chemically and cannot be physically separated. What exactly does this look like? Well, one option is that the substance contains only one type of atom. So the formula will be the atomic symbol and state, like Ag, silver, parentheses S for solid. In other words, elements are the simplest substance. Diamonds, which are made up of carbon atoms linked together under high pressure, are a substance. The silver and gold contained in jewelry, which are made up of only silver and gold atoms respectively, are also elements and therefore substances. Now let's think of a different case, water. Pure water contains only the chemical with the formula H2O, but that formula has multiple types of atoms. Is water a substance? Pause the video, think about it, and commit to an answer. The answer is yes, pure water is a substance. It's just not an element. We actually have another type of substance, a substance that contains multiple different types of atoms. This substance is called a compound. Any substance that can be written with a chemical formula, a single chemical formula, broken down into the same pattern of atoms linked together and has two or more types of atoms in it, is considered a compound. Water, dihydrogen monoxide, is a compound. Table salt, the chemical formula of which is NaCl, is a compound. Rubies, which are crystals of the compound Al2O3 or aluminum oxide and other gemstones, are also compounds. In the next videos, we'll learn how to use the mole to talk about different quantities of elements and compounds. Mixtures are where you mix two or more substances together. And when we use the mole in mixtures, as we'll see in the last video, things get a little more complicated, but we can do it sometimes. The parts are not chemically connected to each other, they don't have the same chemical formula, and they can be physically separated. Mixtures arise when the different parts have separate, unlinked, unrelated chemical formulas. We run into mixtures a lot in our lives and nowhere more commonly than with food. Anything you see that has visibly separate multiple parts can be considered a mixture. Matzo ball soup, where delicate dumpling pillows made from matzo meal float or sink. In chicken broth, or xiaolongbao, which actually contains the broth inside of the dumpling, are mixtures. We can see, distinguish, and physically separate the parts. When we're talking about food though, what about simple syrup? Simple syrup is a liquid that contains sugar dissolved in water. It's used to make cocktails especially. It's clear, it doesn't have any visible chunks or specks, and honestly it looks a lot like water, which is a compound. Is simple syrup a mixture even though we can't distinguish multiple parts? Pause and have a think. Yes, simple syrup still is a mixture, even though it doesn't look like one. This is because table sugar is its own compound that is chemically distinct from water. The chemical name for sugar is sucrose, and it has the chemical formula C12H22O11. When we make simple syrup, what happens is the water molecules break up the sucrose crystals, and the individual sucrose molecules are evenly distributed through the water, so you can't see them anymore. Now, how can simple syrup and chunky soup both be considered mixtures? Like with substances, there are two different types of mixtures. The first are heterogeneous mixtures like soup or the dumplings. Heterogeneous mixtures are mixtures where you can see and make out the different substances mixed together, or the parts aren't evenly distributed. Often the substances can be different phases, such as solid and liquid, and can be separated by touch or by some kind of physical manipulation. Another example is orange juice with pulp in it. However, you can have heterogeneous mixtures that are less easy to spot. Milk, for example, is a heterogeneous mixture, and it's cloudy because the fat particles in milk don't completely dissolve in water. A sign that a liquid is a heterogeneous mixture is if the liquid is chunky or cloudy. In the chemistry lab, you'll run into heterogeneous mixtures whenever you're trying to dissolve a chemical in water and it doesn't completely dissolve. One place this tends to happen is when you dye with indigo, which isn't really soluble, and you end up with scum on the top and grainy leftover indigo particles on the bottom that mess up your dyed piece. Not bitter. What's simple syrup then? We also have a name for mixtures that we can't actually tell are mixtures from sight alone. These mixtures are called homogeneous mixtures. Liquid homogeneous mixtures are called solutions. Their parts can be physically separated, but are so well mixed that we can't tell them apart. You can distinguish a homogeneous liquid mixture from a heterogeneous liquid mixture because homogeneous liquids are clear. And this lab will do a lot of work with homogeneous mixtures. A good dye bath is a homogeneous mixture. The dyes that we'll prepare in our lab kits, which are essentially teas, are homogeneous mixtures. Because we've extracted a color molecule from a plant or animal, which then evenly distribute themselves through the water. Other dyes, such as the dyes that come in a tie-dye kit or the RIT bottle at the grocery store, are also homogeneous mixtures. Homogeneous mixtures can also be solid, such as steel, which is an alloy of multiple elements that do not have the same chemical formula, as well as air, which is nitrogen, oxygen, and some other gases. We have a special word that arises from homogeneous mixtures that are a chemical being dissolved in water, and that is a solution. And this is where we come back to the mole. In the next video, we'll learn about the mole and how it is used to convert between amounts of different pure substances, be it elements or compounds. In fact, the mole will allow us to convert between different substances in a way that makes sense. After we tackle the mole, we'll learn about molarity, which is how we talk about amounts of chemical that are dissolved in water to form solutions. And once we tackle molarity, well, we have the tools we need to set up a dye bath.